So,
Man, I got a bro. He's a Arapaho. He's from the Arapaho Nation in Wyoming. Man, you guys could be twins, man.
Really?
That's crazy.
so Peter and Dolores, hi, good to see you. But why do you think it took so long to finally get a documentary about this amazing woman?
Because the goddess had a plan. She wanted Dolores' story to come out right now in the Trump era when we need this example more than ever. Firm believer in that.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense.
Well, to that point, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
To that point, Dolores, you've had a lot of ups and a lot of successes in the struggle throughout the years, but you had your fair share of downs and lows and setbacks. Is there a particular message that you send to the dreamers that are having a hard time with their own right now?
Well, the one thing I learned in the movement for justice is that you never quit and you never go back. And things happen sometimes we don't know why. And I know people say that that's corny to say that things happen for a reason. But I do believe in that, because when we look back and we say, why was this guy elected president of the United States? Because maybe we had to come to terms with the racism in the United States of America. And we've never done that. And now we know that it's going to bring our country down, and it's going to affect the whole world if we don't take care of it here in the United States. And so now that it's facing us, and then we see all these things that he's doing, attacking people of color, the transgender folks, women's reproductive rights, then we know. And now DACA, it was like, this is like the one that is just infuriating the public, because you've got like millions of people in the United States supporting these DACA students that have brought so much to this country in terms of their contributions and of their, not only their work, their intelligence, but economic uplifting of this country. And so, when he's going after them, then I think the rest of the world is saying, okay, ya basta, enough is enough. So we say, number one, let's thank them for their heroic courage that they've had over the years, even when they fought for DACA in the first place. And then the leadership that they're showing now. And the main thing is that they have to keep on. They cannot quit. They can't get despair. They can't get cynical. We've got to fight. This is it. This is it. And you know what? We're going to win. I just feel in my heart, we know that the Attorney General of New York, Eric Schneiderman, is taking this whole issue to court and proving by Trump's own words against Mexicans, calling us rapists and criminals and going after Judge Cuellar, all of the things that he's done, and now going after the DACA students who are 70% Mexican, that they feel they have a case, a civil rights case, because you cannot discriminate against a class or a group of people, and this is what Trump is doing.
You said you didn't identify as a feminist at the beginning. However, meeting Gloria Steinem, you got to the point where you did identify it. Lately, there's been a lot of talk about intersectional feminism and how feminism as a whole has left out women of color. Do you think that is still ongoing? And if so, what do you think we have to do to be more inclusive as a whole there's separate issues on all sides?
Well, I think one of the issues that separates many women of color from the feminist movement is the issue of abortion. And I know because we people of color have been the victims of genocide for so many years. So when we think of abortion, we think, oh, no, we want more of us, not less of us here in this country. But I think, and that's, I know I had to wrestle with that issue myself. But then understanding that it's not about race, that it's about a woman's body. It's about women having the right to abortion, a woman being able to control her own body and her own life. But unfortunately, we still have the Catholic Church. We have the evangelical churches also that keep saying to women and to everybody else, no, you've got to elect candidates that are what they call pro-life. Well, they say they're pro-life, but do they take care of children when they're born? Mm-hmm. Are they fighting for early childhood education? Are they fighting to keep our kids in school so they can get a quality education? They're not. This is just a political issue. And I think we, as women of color, have got to understand that we can be and should be feminists. We've got to cross that bridge like I did. And I always say, when I talk to people, I say to them, lo que dijo Benito Juárez. What did Benito Juárez say? El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz. Respecting other people's rights is peace. I have 11 kids. My daughter Juanita prefers to have dogs, okay? And that is, and the same thing applies to gay marriage. If somebody gets married or somebody of their own sex, that's none of anybody's business. That is their business, and we have to respect their human right to marry whomever they want.
I have a question that piggybacks off of that. There was a wonderful scene in the film where Coretta Scott King was seen walking alongside you guys, and they're just even larger than intersectional feminism. There seems to be a lack of cohesion between a lot of the movements that are going on right now in the United States, Black Lives Matter, the Dreamers. What do you think needs to happen in order for us to come together? Because I do agree with you that we're going to persevere, but we have to do it as one group. So what are your thoughts on kind of?
Well, I know it's hard because we have to support each of these movements, and I know each of our movements is being attacked separately.
Yeah.
And they do that very specifically because they want us to get freaked out with being attacked, that I've got to fight for my own group, and I don't have time to join the March of Black Lives Matter or support the transgender people in our community. But I think we have an obligation to do that to the extent that we can, whether it's just sending an email, writing a letter, going to a march, going to a demonstration, giving public support, visible support, by endorsements and proclamations. And if we can't make it, like today, a very good friend of mine who passed away, who was Jewish, kind of the first person in Bakersfield that ever supported the Farm Workers Union, a big contributor to my foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation. He passed away and had his funeral today. I couldn't be there, but you know what? My executive director, Camila Chavez, is there. And my son, Emilio Huerta, is there. I couldn't be there. So sometimes we can't be there, but we can say, okay, let's split up. You're going to go to that march, and we're going to go to this march, right? So we have to, and especially our LGBT community, I just want to say that, because, we have to speak up to defend our LGBT people in our community. In our foundation, we've got LGBT organizers. We have a transgender organizer, because we've got to educate our community on those issues. Just the same way we have to educate them on the issues of transgender and LGBT rights.
I want to add though too, and I think if looking at Dolores, her example and her work, particularly in the film, the struggle started off as a labor struggle, and then all of a sudden they come up against this wall, racial injustice, and then at the same time these powerless workers are while they're picking in the fields, they're being sprayed by toxic chemicals. And it morphs into a struggle for environmental justice. And then at the same time, as a woman and as a woman of color, experiencing gender bias within the dominant culture, but also within the movement itself, her struggle morphs into also a feminist struggle. And so looking at the film, particularly from that organic place where she lives, you can see that they're all interrelated. Oh, yeah. They're not necessarily separate, and I think that's the thing we need to liberate ourselves from. And like she just said, divide and conquer is a military strategy that was used at the very beginning of colonization, throughout the Third World. And it's a strategy being employed right now to divert us again to a more important issue, which is the divide between the rich and the poor. Mm-hmm. I mean, right now we see racial strife happening in the country, and fear being kind of nurtured and fanned, but we can't be deterred by that. And I think the young activists today, we can't get deterred and fall back into silo organizing. These issues, they're interconnected because of our identities. They're multiple. They're complex. I know for myself, I don't belong just to one group or one community. I'm multifaceted, just like a white person. We kind of assume that white people, in the film genre, it's really clear. White folks can have dramas, thrillers, comedies, musicals, but if you have a film of color, it has to be pigeonholed into one thing. But we're complex. We have multiple identities, and I think we have to liberate ourselves from thinking in a silo mentality.
Yeah, as an Afro-Latina, I really identify with that.
Her example, it's right there. It's so clear.
Yeah, it really unfolds.
Yeah, and I really get concerned about the strategy of division that the Republicans, and I really am worried about the DACA thing, and I'll tell you why. Because when Trump said, I'm going to turn it over to the Congress, okay, what's the strategy there? He could have just said himself, I'm going to do this, whatever. Give it 6 months, 2 years, whatever. But he said, I'm turning it over to the Congress. Mm-hmm. And then you think, okay, what's happening in the Congress? They want to get money to build a wall, right? They're trying to do other things in terms of tax reform. to take away entitlements from the poor people. And so I feel like they might want to use DACA as a bargaining chip, because there's such huge support in the public. You know, when you have 80% of the American public supporting the DACA students, what is their strategy? And I think just we have to be aware that they might say, okay, we're going to give you DACA, you can stay here in the country, but you've got to support the Republican Party. And at the same time, the Republican Party is going after immigrants, right, and going after transgender people, women's reproductive rights, the environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have to be really careful and be able to observe, because we know that they are very clever strategists. And I am very worried that they're going to try to divide our community. And I'll give you a good example of that. There are Latinos out there that voted for the Republicans because they say, oh, they gave us amnesty. They didn't give you amnesty. That was Senator Ted Kennedy. I worked that bill through the Congress. I was in Washington for 4 months, you know. But many people still believe that.
Back in '86.
Yeah, back in 1986, you know. So we have to be really careful. And that's why it's important that we get engaged at the local level. And I am saying that we have to build a wall of resistance in the Congress of the United States in 2018, because all of these Congress people have to run for re-election. And if all of us really, you know, get out there and do our job, you know, become citizens if we're not citizens, register to vote if we haven't done so, vote if we're registered and haven't voted, because of our numbers that we have, and we can make sure that we can take over the U.S. Congress. I think that's got to be our mission. And we could do it, and then we could stop the policies that Trump is trying to pass, and maybe bring back the ones that he's trying to undo. So it's in our hands. Está en nuestras manos. You know, it's in our hand, but we've got to get out there and we've got to get engaged. And we hope that the film will give people that inspiration. Because if the farm workers could beat Richard Nixon, the President of the United States, the poorest and the most discriminated people, what can we not do? Those of us who are citizens who speak English, right? And even all the undocumented people, they can also help, because we've got to go out there. It's not just voting, it's campaigning. It's supporting good people that are running for office, and maybe some of us having to run for office also.
Gotta run for office.
That's one of the things about the documentary that I really love. There's no holding back. I mean, you're putting it all out there. And I mean, I think a lot of people didn't realize that it was the Filipinos march that started, you guys got involved with, and I thought that was really amazing. Plus, I didn't start eating grapes again until 2000.
Thank you. We had actually, Cesar and I started organizing the union in 1962, and we were not going to go on strike till 1968. So what people don't realize is that before that strike started, we had been organizing people in their homes for 3 years, because we wanted to do a general strike in the whole Central Valley, all the way from Stockton, all the way to Bakersfield. But when the Filipino brothers went out on strike, then we had to make a choice. Did we support them? Did we go back to our original plan, keep on organizing and let them crush the Filipino brothers? Or do we support them and, you know, engage in the strike? Because they were the minority of the farm workers. So we had to throw out our plan and our strategy and make a whole new one by getting involved in the strike.
And that goes back to what you said about we have to be inclusive, we have to work together.
We have to be united.
Yeah.
So your fight was for social justice started over 50 years ago. How do you compare over 50 years ago, how it was then, to the problems that we're having right now? And is it easier to be fighting for social justice now than it was then? Or was it easier then than it is now?
I think it's easier now, and I'll tell you why. Because we have cell phones, and we have computers, and we have Facebook, and you know, Instagram, and Twitter, and all of that, so we can get information out there. But we mustn't mistake mobilization and marching for voting and for organizing. Because we can have all the people in the world marching till they turn blue in the face, and it's not going to change anything. I mean, we can get information, we can get support, but unless people vote, because the people that are in those positions of power, they make the decisions. You know, the policies, how our tax dollars are going to get spent. More money for jails or more money for schools? You know, we have to remember that. And so that's why we have to really pay attention and see who's running for office. And also get involved with legislation. We know SB 54 is right now going to be voted on in the Assembly. We've got to make sure that the governor signs that bill. So it doesn't take a lot of time to send an email to the governor or pick up the phone to talk to our local assemblyman to make sure that they vote on the bill. You know, so this is why we have to get engaged and get informed and see what people are doing.
Peter, can you take us to the genesis of this project? How was it that you approached your brother and Carlos Santana, and how was it that this even came into your ether, into your
Right.
mind space?
Well, I mean, I come from a narrative film background, and I hadn't really entertained the thought of ever making a documentary, but I have to really credit Carlos Santana. He called me 5 years ago and said, we need to tell this story now. And it was like a directive. Boom, we got to do it now. And so it was kind of, I've known Dolores, I was around her when I was a child, and I've known her and her children, off and on through the years. So there was already a relationship there, and an admiration and respect. So it was a no-brainer, to do it. But I do remember a conversation. Carlos called, and he's also known Dolores for a long time, and he would go out and support the farm worker struggle. He'd do fundraisers for her foundation, and he's always been a huge supporter. But he called me and says, "Did you know Dolores Huerta, one of her great inspirations is Charlie Parker, the jazz musician?" And so, he would tell me about these conversations he and Dolores would have till the wee hours of the morning, talking about jazz and dance. One of Carlos's big inspirations was Miles Davis. So, you could tell, Carlos was just so animated when he would be talking about Dolores and their love of jazz music, and then come to find, everyone we interviewed would talk about how, Dolores would dance the night away. She worked 16 hours a day, and then she'd, cut up on the dance floor, and this became like a common thing with every interview. And I said, oh my God, I'm sensing an energy here. I'm sensing like a theme. And so music then became a really exciting way into the narrative itself. And then hanging out with her, I thought I knew who she was, but I had no idea. But she was actually wanted to be a professional dancer, and she had done modern and ballet and jazz and flamenco. And then I became really captivated by that as a way in and out of the different chapters of the story, and I felt like that was an artistic way in. And then come to find that in many social movements, music and art, it's what keeps us buoyant and energized, because the victories are few and far between, and the defeats are often. And so we need, a lot of times it's our cultura, it's our music, it's the creativity, it's the artists who lift us up. And so we felt like that had to be a really important element that appeared throughout the film.
Awesome.
Can I just say that this documentary was really enlightening, because as in school you don't really learn about the females, you learn about the males, and you're one of the biggest civil rights activists. So how does it feel to have this documentary and finally get the recognition that you deserve?
Well, I don't think it's so much about recognition. I see the documentary as a call to action for people. When they see the documentary, I hope that they see, oh, man, those farm workers did that, then I can do that also. And that they see the need for organizing and activism and for engagement. That's what they hope they see, because there were many people in the farm worker movement that people don't know their names, people that were killed. Our first martyr was a young 18-year-old girl named Ann Friedman, a Jewish girl from Boston, who was run down in a truck in a strike that we had with the sugarcane workers in Florida. And our second martyr was a young Arab named Majid Aifala, who was killed by one of the deputy sheriffs, there of Kern County. And then the third one was Juan de la Cruz, who was shot in the heart by a labor contractor. Our fourth one was Rufino Contreras down in the Imperial Valley, who walked into a field when they were on strike, into a lettuce field, and was met with a hail of 80 bullets, And then our last one was a young 19-year-old named Janae Lopez, who organized his company to vote for the union. This is after the law that the workers could organize had already passed. And then because we won the election, called him over to a car, they said, Renee, we want to talk to you, put his head up to the window, and they shot him in the temple and killed him instantly. So nobody knows these names, right? They're all the people that went to jail, the people that were beaten up, and so those people need to be recognized. So I think I am really blessed, because I was taught how to organize by this great human being, Fred Ross Sr., who happened to be a gringo. The godfather of the Chicano movement is a white guy, okay? Fred Ross Sr., and he also taught Cesar how to organize, and myself. And once we learn these skills, then we have to take them to communities and teach people those same skills so that they can empower themselves and take over their own lives and improve their communities. So I feel like I'm very blessed. I've gotten so much that being so-called recognized. I mean, and I guess the only thing that we have to say, I think that in some respects, because as a woman, we know that women are sometimes left, often, not sometimes, often left behind, like Hillary Clinton. You know, regardless of all of her accomplishments, you know, she didn't take the presidency because the machismo in this world is still alive and well. The misogyny, along with the racism and the homophobia and the bigotry against poor people, is still alive and well. And so, in that respect, you know, I hope that a lot of women get inspired, and a lot of other people get inspired, so that we can take it on and make this world a real democracy, our country a real democracy.
I mean,
Last question.
to your point, I do want to add that the use of narrative, the use of story, it's a political tool, and those in power know that. And oftentimes, even right now, what's going on with the Confederate statues, you know, about whose history it is, you know, whose heritage are we preserving, you know, which stories are included in the national narrative, which ones are left out. You know, you think about the Columbus story, the Thanksgiving story, the Monroe Doctrine. You know, there's, you know, the place of women. You look at all the shows and films in the 50s about women and their place. You know, who's manufacturing those narratives? And so I do think it's really important to recognize, and we try to point this out in the film, you know, how narrative is used to control and move a certain political agenda forward. And one of the things that I think Dolores had a problem with, I don't know what I'm saying, is even right here in this interview, she's, you know, she's trying to recognize other people. That's what an organizer does. So the difficult thing was getting her to come along and telling a story about her and her life. And I think that the power in that is oftentimes women and people of color, we don't think that we don't think we deserve a place at the table, because that's not the narrative that we've been conditioned, you know, that we've been brought up with. And so I really hope that young women of color, or young women period, and everybody can, I think her example gives permission, you know, and can inspire and change the narrative, which needs to change. Because we all deserve a place at the table. Everyone's voice matters.
And I think everybody's story matters, right? I mean, like we saw in the film. And one thing I want to share with you that we've been saying to all of the rest of the media, and so there's so many of you that are here, and especially to people that are discouraged. We're quoting the Chilean poet Pablo Neruda when he said, "You can cut all the flowers, but you can't hold back the spring." And so that we have to think of ourselves as that we are that spring, and we're going to out there, and by working and voting, we are sowing the seeds of justice. And yes, the spring will come, and we are that spring. We are that spring.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I was telling these guys that I can say that I've danced with you a few times.
You know, they could try to erase you from the history books with Peter's masterpiece. I mean, who reads books anywhere, right? It's all electronic. We're going to see you forever and ever.
Well, you know, the Texas School Board mandate still stands. She's not included and will not be included anytime soon in the social studies curriculum as
Well,
dictated
my
by
mom
the
taught me
Texas.
about you, and I'll teach my kids about you,
No,
and
thank
all of
you.
us are going to teach our kids about you.
Because I